I had no idea there was this many DSs. The fact that he's like, oh yeah, they're all good, except for the one that I grew up with. Generic intro into that goes Moo here, back with another Scott the Waz video, and today we're doing the Nintendo DS Touched at First Sight, which is an interesting title there, Scott. Not sure what you're thinking with that one. It's been a while since I've done a Scott the Waz video because a lot of videos have been dropping recently that I've absolutely had to react to, but the last one I did was, I believe, about the 3DS, which is something I've never used ever, and learned a lot about the 3DS. You can check my reaction to that video. I'll leave it right up there. Also, link down below in the description if you want to watch that. Also, shout out to the patrons because they get all the videos there early at 11 time. I have a paywall on the channel. I read every single one of your comments, at least them down below, and that's actually where I was told to react to this video next, because I gotta go through the old Scott the Waz videos before I can get to the new ones, apparently, because there's kind of like a plot and a main story going on behind, and character introductions and stuff like that I absolutely need to see. But this is the Nintendo DS, even though the one in the picture is, I believe, the DS Lite, which I did not like the way the DS Lite felt in my hands. Pause. I had the thick, chunky DS, the red one. Actually, I had two of them. I'm not sure where they are. They're probably at my parents' house. But let's go ahead and jump into the Nintendo DS Touched at First Sight. All right.
Hey y'all, Scott here, and congratulations on finally not getting that job I just applied to, because I'm really gonna get it this time. I put any and all contact information on my resume, including when and where I'm available on PictoChat.
Oh.
That'll set me apart.
The Nintendo DS is God's favorite little portable. There is no conceivable way that a product that initially looked like this did this. But Nintendo did the unthinkable and sold over 150 million of these things.
That's a
lot. After closer examination, it's incredibly apparent why. The game library is suddenly endless. It initiated tons of concepts that are still being used to this day, and it got all of our uncles to actually play video games. Now, I personally played this guy a ton. The Nintendo DS line of consoles got me through so many cartridges.
The fact that you could have
always keep my eyes on the screens the entire time during
games.
them, and because of that, only recently I learned that toll booths exist. The DS was announced in late 2003 as simply a new system to be released in 2004, with Nintendo also stating they were planning to focus on developing games that anybody could get behind. A few months later, in early 2004, the codenamed Nintendo DS was unveiled,
which DS stands for dual screen.
Feature two whole screens. Nintendo used a soccer game
which
as an
blew my
example for
mind.
dual screen gaming in their press release, describing how one screen could show the main gameplay while the other could display a specific player's tackle or goal. You ever just play a soccer game and you're like, there's just not enough screens? The idea behind two screens was a bit odd at first. Nintendo definitely needed to prove their worth, and keep in mind, at this point, all we knew about the Nintendo DS was that it had two screens. Everything else lodged in the system would officially be revealed later at E3 2004. Yeah, the Nintendo DS wasn't a looker during its prototype phase, but at least Nintendo made up for it by showing off a Metroid Prime game running on the system. Yes, Nintendo's premier 3D first-person shooter was playable on a handheld. That was insane.
I mean, nowadays.
Not only that, but they also showed off a demo of Super Mario 64 running on the device. This much cockiness can't be healthy.
I mean,
touchscreen, microphone, Game Boy Advance support, wireless multiplayer, a terrifying design, the whole suite of DS features were unveiled at this point.
You got the Steam
Metroid
Deck.
Prime Hunters, Super Mario 64x4, WarioWare, and the PictoChat application were all playable at the show, alongside playable tech demos that would later become games like Yoshi Touch and Go and the 3DS launch title Steel Diver. Plus, Nintendo showed off videos of upcoming games like Mario Kart DS, Animal Crossing DS, New Super Mario Bros., and Nintendogs. Nintendo later confirmed that Nintendo DS would be the final name for the product, alongside showing off the finalized design. Go back. And the handheld would officially launch on November 21st, 2004 here in North America for $149.99.
That's a great price, honestly.
Now, I don't know about anybody else, but at the height of the DS dynasty, I barely saw the original model out in the wild. It was a rarity. You'd see everybody else playing their DS Lites and DSi's, and then there was that one kid that nobody trusted. Any version of the DS prior to 2006 looked pretty horrendous, to put it lightly. This looks like something you put in a holster. It always looked more like equipment than a sleek video game system.
I love it!
The bottom half has some meat on its bones. It feels way
better in hand.
Ridges and indents add up to a video game system with a question mark at the end. At least it's comfortable enough to play.
Yeah.
The buttons feel perfectly fine, and it conveniently uses the GBASP charging cable. However, things really start picking up when you actually turn the system on. Touch the touchscreen to continue. Holy shit, this is the future. 2008, here we come. Dual screens weren't necessarily the talk of the town when it came to the DS.
Sideways.
Most of it came from the touchscreen. Remember, this was 2004. Touchscreens were seldom used, and when they were, it was almost always stuff like PDAs. And these definitely won't play pack picks, so that's a point for the DS right there. However, the DS was definitely all about video games, even if the user interface tries to scream, I can be a PDA too! A calendar and a clock, that's all you really need.
The memories.
Instant messaging application, well, don't mind if I do! PictoChat is much more than just the best stage in Super Smash Bros. Brawl, and it wasn't just an application. it was an experience.
I
You could start a chat room
remember
with 15 other players nearby and just
in the Boy Scouts,
whatever you want to
we were going camping.
Also just use it
We
by
would all
yourself.
just get
I
in
used to make some
PictoChat.
pretty slick flip books by just sending a bunch of images and then rapidly going through them all. Here's me drawing stuff on it back in 2009. Whoa! It was never online, so it would only let you chat with people in the same room. You may ask, oh, what's the point of messaging people if you have to be in the same room? Well, just ask the Nintendo DS Stylus, or as I like to call it, the Crotch Doodler. Yeah, the DS touchscreen was just too small and not well suited for finger use.
Yeah,
It was always best to use it for applications that required a more sensitive touch. But
I mean,
by God, they made it hard to warrant using it on the original DS model. Listen, I get it. They
What?
probably
Why?
couldn't put the stylus slot on the right or left-hand side where, you know, your hand would actually be, because
I
of
thought
how
it
the
was
system's
fine.
internals had to be laid out. But I don't care, I'm still gonna whine about it. The stylus placement on this thing reeks. No matter who you are, having the stylus on the top left-hand corner is dreadful. But you know what's one of the lamest things about the original DS? The fact that if you do anything on this system and want to go back to the home screen, you have to turn the system off and on again. I mean, it's not a huge deal, but seriously, if you just go into the settings, not do anything, and try to go back, it forces you to turn the entire system off. Like, that just kind of defeats the entire purpose of having a home screen at all, but whatever.
I didn't even notice
Nintendo was
that
still
was the
supporting
thing.
the Game Boy Advance and GameCube.
Dude, that thing was
I
amazing.
always maintained that the DS was a successor to neither of those platforms. Rather, it was a third pillar for the company, and man, Nintendo's comedy routine was really getting good at this point. You were just saying that in case the DS
cargo
failed.
shorts
Plus, if it
pocket.
wasn't a successor, why was it
I'd
backwards
use that thing
compatible
in
with the GBA?
high school.
But hey, I'm not complaining about this feature. Having the ability to play all Game Boy Advance games instantly gave the DS a library to reckon with. It's unfortunate they cut it off at GBA and didn't support Game Boy Color in the original
I
Game
mean,
Boy,
there was attachments
at the time
you
of
can
the
get,
DS's release,
I believe.
Sony was preparing the launch of their first true handheld console, the PlayStation Portable, and almost everybody placed their bets on Sony winning the war. Nintendo never really had a huge threat in terms of handheld competition up until this point. I think Sega probably got the closest with the Game Gear, and I will debate anybody who considers that thing handheld or competition. Sony was the clear leader of the video game market at the time, and the mere idea of them breaking into handhelds made many go, yeah, the one that plays Daxter is gonna win. The PSP was sleeker and way more powerful. So Nintendo had to do something to prove to
Nintendo's not really
everybody
known
that
for
the DS
their
could handle more demanding
powerful
games.
equipment. It's their games.
What did they do at launch? They bundled in a demo of Metroid Prime Hunters and crammed Super Mario 64 into a fucking cheese-it of a game card. The launch titles of the DS were pretty weak in my opinion. Really, the only major highlight was Super Mario 64
What about
DS.
Mario Kart?
Listen, the entire concept of playing
great.
Super Mario
I love
64
Mario
on the go was mind-blowing at the time. To have a game like Super Mario 64 on the go may not seem like a big deal now, but back then, it was amazing. It truly made the DS feel like a home console you could take on the road. The game looked really good for the system, and some may say it looked even better than the original. That's debatable. Like, it looks better in the sense that the character models are all updated, but everything's much more pixelated overall. However, I think it still looks quite good for the
why did that
platform
turn?
and is just a solid remake all around. Too bad my thumbs fucking hate it. Yeah, most of my showers nowadays consist of me thinking about why they thought Mario 64 on the DS was a good idea considering it only has a D-pad. I mean, it works, but it's not ideal in the slightest. They give you a few control options, including using the touchscreen to walk around. Jesus. But the D-pad is the most optimal, and it's still putrid. And to everybody who says, play it on the 3DS, that way you'll get your precious analog stick. Guys, the game was programmed to function with a D-pad and a run button. Using a circle pad doesn't fix the issues. It still doesn't feel right. It just kind of bugs me that they put so much work into a remake of Mario 64, only to have it kind of ruined by the limitations of the hardware they put it on.
But it got people to play
Metroid Prime Hunters, with it being a first-person shooter on the platform. I think Nintendo wanted to prove at launch that the DS could do things that it could definitely
didn't use the stylus all
crazy
that much.
However, by around 2006, Nintendo totally threw this urge out the window and focused on
the casuals.
This was when the DS really took off, and the console's
DS
first
Lite.
redesign played a key role here. The Nintendo DS Lite, released on June 11, 2006, was everything Civilization was leading up to. The difference between the first model and the Lite are night and day. The Lite improved on nearly everything. The design was sleek and refined. The screens actually totally didn't reek. The stylus placement, the stylus placement. The only two negative things about the Lite were the fact that the GBA games stuck out when you popped them in, and it used its own proprietary charger. Other than that, this is a beautiful system. This was the model I got as a kid back in 2007. I had the white one and got so much playtime out of it. But
I had the original
because 2 years later, another redesign
Me and my brother
came
both
out,
had
the
one.
Nintendo DSi, released on November 1st, 2008 in Japan, with a North American release happening on April 5th, 2009. In short, the DSi was an
6
improved
months?
DS with 2 cameras, but who cares because they got rid of the GBA slot. This was a big deal to a lot of people, and I gotta be honest, it was a pretty solid blow to me. But 2009 Scott still traded his trusty DS Lite in for a black DSi. In my opinion, it was still a worthwhile upgrade simply due to the fact that it added so much functionality to the system. Cameras were the big selling point, but to me, it was cool simply because it almost felt like a Wii in your pocket.
Early Snapchat
the overall presentation
filters
just felt so similar to the Wii, with the way the various apps and games were laid out, the music playing on the home screen. The DSi even had an online shop similar to the Wii, which sold DSiWare games. While the DSi shop was recently closed, all the games minus 10 select ones can be purchased on the 3DSi shop, so it doesn't look like some apocalypse or anything is going to happen. DSiWare always left me feeling a bit empty, though. Much like WiiWare, a ton of garbage was thrown onto the service. Sure, some stellar titles were on there. Shantae Risky's Revenge.
Shantae? I did not expect to give you a Shantae
there sure was a ton of trash. Nintendo charged like $2 each for calculator and clock apps. Like, come on.
Why?
WarioWare Snapped was a criminally short WarioWare title that used the cameras and had you batting your hands around to play micro games, and that barely worked. Dr. Mario Express was a solid Dr. Mario game, but it didn't have online play, so that was a bummer. But at least Flipnote Studio was awesome. It was a really great little animation tool. Photo Dojo was so cool. You took pictures and turned yourself and friends into fighting game characters. There was definitely fun to be had with some DSiWare games, but there just wasn't a ton of heavy hitters. And I was also always bummed they never had a virtual console for the DSi shop. Like, come on, you took away the GBA slot, you should have had a virtual console to resell old handheld games. Outside of the internet functionality, the DSi had terrible cameras coupled with amazing software. All the edits you could do to your pictures were awesome, and you could also mess with audio recordings via the DSi sound
Oh, it could do that?
Once again, though, a new charging cable is used, which is a mega annoyance. Now, if you hate the
and
idea
they're
of
always,
a handheld
they're
system
not like,
being handheld, Nintendo
they're always
released a variant
proprietary.
of the DSi a year
They're not one you have
the
laying
Nintendo
around.
DSi XL, launching on November 21st, 2009.
I had no idea there was this many DSs.
2010 in North America. They weren't kidding. This is, in fact, an XL version of the DSi.
Every time I saw one that wasn't mine, I was like, ew.
The DSi XL is for you. It has a glossy coating on the outside and came with a fountain pen. Other than that, it's literally just a bigger DSi. The XL systems were marketed towards the more hardcore players with the Nintendo 3DS line, but the DSi XL? Just take a look at the colors we got. Burgundy and bronze. These things flooded retirement homes. And those are all the DS models out there. And in terms of which systems hold up best today, I'd say anything from the DS Lite onwards. However, I think all the variations have great feeling controls. The DS Lite has a bit of a softer, squishier D-pad, and while that sounds bad, it actually feels really nice. The DSi is much clickier if you're into that sort of thing. You can play DS games on the 3DS, but if you want an original DS model, I'd say go with the Lite. The DSi's exclusive features aren't too awful compelling nowadays, and the lack of GBA compatibility makes the DS Lite far more useful. Plus, almost all of the DSi features live on with the 3DS. The cameras, sound app, DSiWare games, it's all there, so the DSi itself isn't too often necessary to own these days. But now,
no, they don't make
them. Gotta talk about the games.
Because now they just do the
Switch. No matter how you
Switch.
slice it, the DS had an insane library. I definitely say the third-party support was crazy impressive, maybe even better than Nintendo's. That's not to say Nintendo's
Couldn't you play Call of Duty?
Good,
or was Call of Duty
the
only?
sheer amount of quality
Grand Theft Auto and
DS
DS.
insane. I'd say the DS had better third-party support than the 3DS. However, the 3DS had better first-party support. Looking at the big 3 Nintendo franchises represented on the DS, the results were a bit iffy. Now, I already talked some Super Mario 64 DS, but in terms of original Mario titles on the platform, none were as prolific as new Super Mario.
I don't think it's very new.
It completely stole the show. Was the game to
Still
get
never
with
played
the
a Mario
DS,
game outside of Mario Kart.
The first original 2D Mario game in years definitely helped it out. While it was lauded as one of the best Mario games out there at launch, its reception has definitely went down a bit over time simply due to how many new Super Mario Bros. Titles followed it. Regardless,
all called
new Super Mario
by the
Bros.
way.
Worked. So Zelda kinda tried a similar
Never played
tactic,
Zelda.
taking 3D models
I plan on
and putting them
streaming
in
it
an
at some
old-school
point.
format. The Legend of Zelda, Phantom Hourglass, and Spirit Tracks are top-down Zelda games with the same aesthetic as the Wind Waker. It looks fine from the top-down view, but when the camera comes up close to the characters, oh god. These Zelda titles definitely have unique controls. You're required to use the touchscreen and drag your stylus wherever you want Link to go. I don't know, it just doesn't feel as good as button controls to me. It doesn't feel like you are Link, it feels like you're leading Link. That's not to say they're bad,
it's also
I'm just not a huge fan of controlling Link here. Everything else works pretty well. Metroid Prime Hunters had you move with the D-pad and aim with the touchscreen. Similar to Mario 64 DS's control scheme, it worked, it just wasn't ideal. It was a B-tier Metroid Prime game, but it was still impressive for the system, and even included online multiplayer with voice chat. But if you love everything about Metroid Prime except for the gameplay, might I recommend Metroid Prime
what is the,
Pinball?
I guess, gimmick for Metroid?
it's better than you think.
Like what makes people play Metroid over, you know,
popularity
Doom
were
or something
definitely
like that,
the Touch
you know?
Generations titles. Games made for those people who don't know where the L button is. Big Brain Academy, Flash Focus, Crosswords DS, Personal Trainer Cooking, but the big one was definitely Brain Age. Flip the DS on its side and hold it like a book to get told off by Dr. Kawashima. Listen, man, the only reason why my Brain Age blows is because this game hates how I write 5s. Speaking of games that anybody could play, I played a lot of Professor Layton and the Curious Village with my mom. This was such a well-made puzzle game with outstanding production values. On the topic of puzzle games, the DS nailed them. This was like the perfect platform for the genre. Meteos is probably the main puzzle game the DS can call its own. It was designed by Masahiro Sakurai, and I'll eventually learn how to play it, but now's not the time because Picross 3D is on the system. You have standard Picross DS and then Picross 3D, which is really
now it's cubes.
Thing. Like, they didn't even have to name it after Picross because it's so unique, even though it's still totally Picross. The Mario vs. Donkey Kong series made its way to the DS, starting with March of the Minis, and does anybody else totally confuse all the subtitles for these games? This was a cute little game. The problem with it is that they just kept on making it over and over and over again. At least this one had cool CG cutscenes. Look at these. My jaw dropped when I saw my DS playing such clean looking videos. One thing this game and Metroid Prime Hunters did was show 2 videos on the separate screens, both of the same scene, but from different angles.
Yeah, I think, well, there was something I saw that...
It's an interesting use of dual screens that you really wouldn't find anywhere else.
Was it? Wait, what was it? There was something that did that.
Being developed by Nintendo, allowed to have this amazing presentation featuring all kinds of old school NES sprites. It's fantastic. And if we're talking retro style games, man, the DS was killer. I think the cream of the crop has to be Retro Game Challenge, a loving homage to gaming in the 80s. But there were also a handful of legitimate compilations, like the Sonic Classic Collection,
I have not played a Sonic game either.
Namco Museum. In terms of throwbacks, Contra 4, man, a great return for the series.
Why are they not? They have
really cool.
Shoulder armor, but
Grand Theft Auto
armor.
Chinatown Wars. Now that's a game that screams, don't put me on DS. But it was still an awesome throwback to the first few top-down Grand Theft Autos, but in the style of entries like Grand Theft Auto 4. It's one of the few M-rated games on the platform.
Right before
really
GTA 5
many
came
out there, but Chinatown Wars is definitely the most iconic. Oh, rhythm games, just Rhythm Heaven and Elite Beat Agents alone make the DS
Is it gonna be like Guitar Hero?
Machine. And we can't forget the Guitar Hero games on the system. They only worked with the DS and DS Lite due to the guitar grip accessory requiring the GBA slot, but man, this was such a creative way to get Guitar Hero on the platform. RPGs just wouldn't stop on here. Of course, these things. I don't get any of this, but Pokemon had a ton of entries on the DS.
Yeah,
Mario
Gen 4, my favorite
continued on here. Final Fantasy games, including some amazing remakes. The definitive version of Chrono Trigger, Dragon Quest, The World Ends With You, Golden Sun. I may not be an RPG guy, but I know they were fantastic on the platform. Mario Kart DS was huge.
There we go.
I personally never owned it when it was big.
What do you mean?
The DS brought so much to
Dude, I remember I would always do the little
tracks and the introduction of 16 retro
the short track and just try and get
mission
fastest
mode.
time I could.
So good. Weirdly enough, if you weren't into Mario Kart, Nintendo also published a remake of Diddy Kong Racing. Yeah, never expected that to come out. Animal Crossing Wild World also brought online play to its franchise for the first time, which became one of the key components of the series. Star Fox Command is better than Star Fox Zero, I'll at least say that. And Chibi Robo actually had games on here. Platformers are my bread and butter, though. Kirby was heavily represented on the DS. The most unique game definitely being Canvas Curse. Look at this, you're drawing lines and guiding Kirby around. That's fun. The legendary Starfy was a worthy alternative to Kirby, while if you wanted something a bit more fast-paced, the Sonic Rush series was definitely your go-to. Mario spin-offs were plentiful and included a sequel to Yoshi's Island. This game reeks. And Super Princess Peach second verse, same as the first. Plus, nothing says I hate sex more than Wario Master of Disguise. At least there was actual Castlevania titles on the platform. Can't say that nowadays. Scribblenauts was a huge deal when it came out. Being able to write anything and it spawning in the game was just such a cool idea. And if you wanted to get even more creative, Drawn to Life allowed you to draw your own hero character. And that's kind of cool. A blast with this. WarioWare DIY similarly let me create my own junk in the form of my own micro games, and I loved every second of it. On the topic of WarioWare Touch was alright, it just didn't grab me as much as other entries. But nothing spoke to me on the DS more so than Nintendogs. This was the
People
first
were
game
crazy
that I owned
about
on the
it.
platform, and it
I've
utilized
never played
every
it.
single feature of the hardware in such fun ways. You could talk to your dog, teach it tricks, play with
I
toys, buy
grew
more
up
dogs,
with
talk to
dogs.
more dogs, teach them tricks.
I guess
play
this
with
one I
toys,
only
buy
had one
more
dog.
dogs. This was a blast. Don't even get me started on the Nintendo DS browser. But you know what was the best thing?
I'm sorry,
about the
there's a
games on
game
the
for a
DS?
browser?
They came in these cases, and they were like half the size of DVD boxes. They just made games feel more substantial. Well, a fair amount of the game library is this. The DS was such a fun system. Unlike the Wii, which was constantly chastised for being a gimmick, I always felt like more were accepting of the DS. The library was crazy,
handheld.
and the gimmicks of the system actually turned out to be incredibly useful in various situations. It was hard to try to remember all the great games on the DS. That's how many there were.
Diamond.
I'm sure I still missed plenty. Phoenix Wright. Phoenix Wright! The series
Phoenix
is great,
Wright.
such a fun visual novel, point-and-click adventure type game. I love these games.
Well,
Never
I just
played
want
Phoenix
my heart
Wright.
to go on and on and on about the Nintendo DS. Maybe I'll see if there's anybody nearby on PictoChat who feels the same way.
Who?
We got a live one. Somebody joined. Maybe I'll tell them I see you like PictoChat. Last two messages didn't send. Yeah, that sounded a lot more
I
than
see
I wanted
you.
it to.
Oh, that's something. I realized a lot of this video is me saying, never played this, never seen that, never heard of that. I'm sorry. I guess it's my childhood. The fact that he's like, oh yeah, they're all good, except for the one that I grew up with. It makes me big sad. Makes me the biggest sad. But that's the Nintendo DS. I didn't know they made 4 versions of it before the 3DS came out. But yeah, no, it was definitely revolutionary. I never wanted a PSP. I was like, I got a DS. I'm good. I like this. And like people would have the DS Lites, and I would just hold them like, I don't like it. I did not like it at all. Did not like using it or anything. Like the DS was perfectly fine for what I needed to do. I did not need anything more than that. And I enjoyed it quite a lot, and I still have it to this day. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's at my parents' house. They're both together. They're both red. Mine's still actually in really good condition, I believe. Of course, a little scuffed up on the edges because the high points get wore down just like you saw with Scott's. But yeah, no, I played a crap ton of Mario Kart 64, not 64, DS. Played a ton of that. Played a Kirby game, and you know, Pokemon Gen 4, a lot of that as well. But I look forward to reading your comments, talking about the Nintendo DS and your various experiences with them. But I'll also look forward to the next Scott the Waz video, and I hope to see you there. Hope you're subscribed so you don't miss it. But until the next one, take care and keep the music.
We were